Last December, the engine in my POS car started knocking and eventually gave out, as well as the transmission. Seeing as it would be more expensive to fix it than it would be to buy a new car, I scrapped it for a few $100 and put the word out that I was looking to buy a car in between 2 to 2.5 grand. I was, and still do, work 2 jobs. So I very quickly tired of having bum rides to work. This fact led me to ignore a few red flags, but I'll get to that. One of my jobs is a corporate 9 to 5. The other is an upscale gentleman's club. I put the word out about needing a car to my co-workers at both places. A month went by, and I hadn't heard a thing, when a waitress at the club pulled me aside. She told me that one of her customers offered her a really good deal on a car, but her parents bought her a brand new Escape, so she didn't need it. He wanted $1,000 for an '06 Chevy with low mileage, and asked if I wanted to be introduced. It seemed like a godsend. I quickly agreed, and she led me over to the back of the bar, to a booth where a tall, broad-shouldered older man sat. He looked about 60 years old, but he was still pretty huge even sitting down. He looked like a retired army guy, with a small beer gut, but lots of old man muscle. Mark, this is Carrie. Carrie, this is Mark. She introduced us, and I sat down next to him. He didn't look at me or acknowledge me, and I got the feeling he was very awkward. My co-worker excused herself and left us. I quickly explained that I was looking for a new car. He finally looked at me, and he began explaining the deal. It was his brother's wife's car. They lived one state over, about 4 hours. They initially bought the car for their daughter, brand new, but she had a baby a few years later and refused to drive it anymore because it was a 2-door and the baby's car seat didn't fit behind the seat. It had been sitting for years, but now the neighbor, who was a cop, was threatening them, saying that if they didn't put insurance in it, they had to get rid of it, or they'd be ticketed. So now they were looking to unload it as quickly as possible. Hence the great deal. I was beyond excited. Mark and I chatted a little longer, albeit awkwardly, and eventually exchanged numbers. Before I went to work, the subject of art came up, and he mentioned he had always wanted to learn how to draw. I got excited, because at the time I was giving private drawing lessons to make extra money. He seemed interested, and after I showed him my portfolio on my phone, and he suggests maybe even knocking the price down a little in exchange for a few lessons, I wrap up our goodbyes and head back to work. He exits my work shortly after. I am ecstatic. At 3 a.m, I'm finally back in civilian clothes, waiting inside the front doors for my ride when Mark texts me. Can you come to my house for the drawing lessons this week? I politely tell him that I didn't feel comfortable with that, because he would have to pick me up and I'd be dependent on him to take me home. And he's a stranger. It just didn't feel right. All the more reason for you to get this car. You deserve it, he replied. I agree, brushing off the second half of the sentence. He's probably just a little lonely and trying to be nice. We set a date and meet up in a public space, so I can check out the car. He plans on paying his niece to make the 4-hour drive the following Tuesday, 5 days from now. I agree. She doesn't mind because her parents are going to let her keep whatever money I pay for it, and Mark will pay for her gas there and back, plus a tip. I forget about Mark for a day or two, until the texts start. All hours of the day, the most random questions, but all of them pertaining to the car and art deals. So I didn't think too much into it. He's never been married, and he claims he has Asperger's, which I found out later was a lie, and that he only has his brother, no one else. I figure he's doing me a favor, and I can answer a few harmless texts. But then I miss a few at work, and he spams me, getting progressively angrier with each text. When I finally respond, I bitch him out, saying he has no right to my time or attention. He relents, saying he thought something bad had happened to me, that's all, and that he wasn't angry. He was scared. I think back to what he said about having Asperger's, and I think maybe I'm misunderstanding his texts, and I kind of feel bad. He stops for a few days, and then Tuesday rolls around. I bring my mum's boyfriend with me to the parking lot as I'm meeting him, and look for the car and his niece. It's beautiful. I love it. My mum's boyfriend says it's a great deal, and that I would be stupid not to take it. I tell Mark I want it, and he spent the whole interaction silent, seemingly intimidated by my mum's 5'1" boyfriend, which is hilarious. The niece drives the car back home. Because the title in his sister-in-law's name, I have to go to her house 4 hours away to have her sign the title over to me. Mark says he has a doctor's appointment at the hospital about 30 minutes from there, so I can ride down there with him and drive myself home. I agree to the seemingly convenient plan, and we set the date for next Wednesday. So, come Wednesday morning at 6 a.m, my mum drops me to Mark's house. I assume his appointment is at 9 or 10, since he wants to leave very early. But he tells me it's at 1. I ask him why the hell he's leaving so early, if the hospital is only 3.5 hours away. He ignores my question, but I have my answer soon enough. This neurotic arsehat has to stop at every rest stop. Every single one. It takes us 6 hours to get to the hospital, almost making us late for his appointment. We park the car and I tell him to ask one of the concierge people where we're supposed to be, as it's a huge hospital. He then screams a racial slur. He's getting frantic, and I'm starting to see how he's a little unhinged. But I'm 3 hours from home, and he's already got my $1,000. I can't back up now. I ask for directions to find the elevator to the floor we need to be on. It's the 8th floor. Mark won't get in. He says he can't do elevators. They'd kill him. Randomly, a mentally handicapped man in a wheelchair next to us repeats the words, "It will kill us." And Mark yells, "See? He knows!" I'm out of patience. I yank him into the elevator, and we finally arrive at his appointment. Just on time. I quickly fall asleep in the lobby, because he would not let me fall asleep in the car, knowing I'd worked till 3 a.m. the night before. I awaken to the sound of Mark screaming at the top of his lungs at the poor clerk behind the desk in the lobby. He's calling her every name in the book: skank, whore, slut, bitch, asshole, and so on. She looks completely terrified, as can be reasonably expected, and screams back that she is calling security. I hop up, grab him by the arm and drag him, literally running back to the elevator. He opens his mouth to protest, but I tell him to shut up and get in the elevator. I am in no mood for this. I refuse to be stranded across state lines because he had landed himself in the slammer for God knows what reason. We exit the elevator just as a team of security guards enter it and rush past them, trying to look normal. We finally get outside and I lose my shit and ask what the hell happened. He told me he was waiting for the doctor and he had to use the bathroom. He came to his room while he was gone, so he skipped him to go to the next patient, and he wouldn't be back for an hour. And I ask what the receptionist has to do with it. And he says that she was in on it, and that she could have told him that the doctor was an arsehole. I just stare at him in disbelief. I fully realize I am dealing with a mentally unstable individual, but I am locked into this deal and I'm 30 minutes from being able to drive away. So I just shake my head and walk back to the car silently. We finally get to the brother's house. The title is signed over to me. All is good, except that the port in the car to charge my phone doesn't work. And now, with my phone being dead, I don't know how to get home. I ask Mark if I can charge my phone in his car for a while, and he says yes. I start to follow him home. It's getting really late at this point, and I'm exhausted, and I beg him please skip a few rest stops. He skips 2, then pulls into a rest area. He hops out of his car with his childish grin, and he says, "You like what I did there? I skipped 2. Oh my Christ. I check my phone and it's on 50%. Good enough. I am done with this guy. I tell him goodbye and thanks, but I'm gonna take off now. And he seems confused. I ignore it and absolutely floor it home. Then the texts begin. Zoom zoom, little girl. Let's see if you find the secret of the wire. You won't make it far, little girl. Zoom. There she goes. I'm creeped the hell out. But I ignore it as soon as the SOS is open. I have registration and insurance on the car. The texts start to get worse. Tell your pimp you messed up, little girl. And I have all the money. Don't ignore me. You think the car is safe? Ha! Silly little girl. You're just a whore junkie. Wait till I go to the cops. You stole that car, and you owe me $2,000. I'm talking to your pimp now, because you're too stupid to come up with that kind of cash. Bring it to me on Monday, or I'm going to the cops and bust your little sex trafficking ring. Variations on this, all day. I block his number. I call Mark's brother just in case, and tell him what's happening. He couldn't care less. He says to pay him, and I say I did. He says, do I have proof? And I say yes. He gave you the money. Why would your wife sign over the title without getting paid? He asks me if Mark knows where I live. I say no, and he just says, good. I start to get texts from a new number, this time claiming to be the cops. I know it's Mark, and I threaten to get a PPO if he doesn't stop. He goes ballistic. He tells me he knows where I live, where my kids go to school, and where I get my drugs. And I know he's lying, because I don't have kids, a pimp, or a drug problem, and I'm not a prostitute. I'm scared shitless, and all I can do is block this number too. I'm always looking over my shoulder leaving work. I sleep with a baseball bat. He attempts to get me fired from my job, but he's laughed out and banned. Months go by, and I start to relax. I can still see if he texts me, even though he's blocked. It just goes to a different folder. I check it once in a while, and for a few months, he sends me completely normal texts, followed by psycho shit when I don't respond. I know you love me, and that's why you're doing this. Because your dad is dead, and so you don't know how to love. It hurts me. Let me buy your kids some toys. It jumps from that to, you whore, zoom zoom. Do you like to ruin men's lives? Stop listening to your meth head brother. Again, I have no kids. I realize he's trying to scare me, and legally, the car is mine. He can't take it from me. I finally relax a little. Then, I happen to be awake one day when the mail lady comes. She knocks and tells me I have to sign for something. She hands me a manila envelope with the name Mark Smith as the return address, my full name on it, and the back is stamped with notify sender stamps, like 100 of them, and erratically placed. My heart stops. He knows where I live. And as much as I'm dying to know what the letter says, I don't sign for it and tell her to return it to sender and explain the situation. Now I realize he probably just looked up my name online and he found 5 different addresses, then sent certified mail to all of them in my name in an attempt to verify at which one I lived. I thwarted his plan by not signing. Screw him. Fast forward 2 months. I am home alone and get a call from a number that I don't know. But it's local, so I picked up. Hi, this is Officer Sanford with the City Fraud Division. Is this Carrie? Oh shit. Yeah, that's me. I believe we have a mutual friend here. My heart sinks. I know he means Mark. Am I screwed? Oh, don't worry, girl, I'm on your side. I think this guy is off his rocker. I've been looking into this for a while, and this just doesn't add up to you being guilty of anything but buying a car. Justice. Turns out Mark walked into a police station to report the car that he never owned, that I had the title to. He reported it stolen, and to report my prostitution ring. He was laughed out, so he wrote letters, lots of them, to the government, to the president, to the sheriff. So a city fraud investigator got involved. He spoke to the sister-in-law and verified she signed the title over, verified I had registration and insurance, looked into my squeaky clean record, and even looked into my schooling and saw very prestigious university. And he spoke to Mark face to face. And he knew Mark was absolutely mental. So he had me write a brief account of my side of the story and advised me to get a restraining order, and told Mark to stay away from me. Me, as well as the brother and sister-in-law actually, and close the case. If Mark ever tries to mess with me again, I've got Officer Sanford's number on speed dial. I am just so relieved that the stalking came to an end. For now, anyway.
Okay, this happened in 2016 when I was 17 years old. First year in college, in film school. I'm now 22 and female. My name's Julia. I lived alone in my first ever apartment. It was really small, but I was really proud of my independence. I never felt unsafe in this apartment for several reasons. There were multiple gates in the residence that needed to be opened through with a code only, and the people who lived there knew. My door had 3 different locks, and it was right next to the university, so most people who lived in the neighborhood were college students. Nothing bad had ever happened in the neighborhood before. I've always had been very careful with locking the door when I left my house. I'd always check twice. I have a slight OCD, so this one time I leave to go to class, and I locked my door. But for some reason, I couldn't get the key out of the lock. It was completely stuck. So I went to get the caretaker of the building to help me get it, but he wasn't there, and I was getting late for class. So I went to class with the key still in the lock. I took off the keychain first so it wouldn't be too noticeable. When I got home, the caretaker was back, so he came with me to help me, but we couldn't get it out of there. For 15 minutes until somehow he did. He told me the lock was damaged, but that I didn't necessarily need to change it, if only if I locked it once instead of twice. I just said, okay, and that was the end of it. I really wasn't worried because of how safe I felt in the building. Flash forward to 2 months later. I was taking out the trash one night around 11 p.m. While on the phone with my sister, I remember telling her that I was out taking the trash. Then that I would take a shower afterwards before heading to a party. As I previously said, I always lock the door, even just to take the trash out. Because of my lock being damaged, I only locked it once. When I got back to my apartment, I found the door unlocked, which immediately alarmed me. So I went into the apartment and locked the door immediately, with 3 different types of locks. When you walk into my apartment, which is just 215 square feet, you have the main room in front of you, and the bathroom door immediately to your left. I had left the bathroom door slightly opened, enough so that I could see that there was a man in my shower, turning his back to me. Naturally, when I saw this, I tried to open the door and leave as fast as I possibly could. Except my main lock was damaged from the 2 months earlier, and I couldn't open it no matter how hard I tried. In this moment, all I could think of was the fact that he had to leave as fast as possible. I jumped out the window without really thinking. I figured it was the only solution, except I lived on the 2nd floor, so I completely smashed my ankles in the landing. I started running in whichever way I could. When I got a little bit further from the building, I looked back. The man was there, at my window, watching me run away. I thought of 2 possible outcomes. Either the man was going to jump and chase me, except I wouldn't get far with my twisted ankles, or he'd get scared of the height and be locked in my apartment. Thankfully, he picked option 2. I went to hide in a bush a little further and called the police, who arrived in just 10 minutes because I lived close to the station. They pushed my door open and the man was just sitting there on my couch, holding a kitchen knife, waiting for me to come back. Like he didn't think I would call the police. They arrested the guy and later told me he'd already been arrested for sexual assault. The R word, attempted kidnapping, and attempted murder. They also told me how everything had happened. Like I said, it was a very friendly neighborhood with mostly college students, so he got inside the building by other people holding the door for him. He then heard me telling my sister I was going to take a shower, which is why he was waiting for me in the bathroom. He crocheted my lock while I was taking out the trash. He apparently noticed me on school campus and followed me to my house several times before, succeeding to actually come in. He stayed inside waiting for me because I had recently changed my phone, and the previous one was still on the table, so he thought I didn't have my phone with me to call the police. I don't live there anymore, but after that, to get into the building, we all needed identification proving we lived there. Building IDs were created, and we had to scan them every time. It was the only way to go inside the building. Nothing bad happened in the neighborhood after that. It's back to being very peaceful and friendly. I've known about this subreddit for a while now, but I've never gotten around to telling my own story, which of course I never thought I'd have. Since it's long, I won't bother with a long intro. All you need to know is this happened in my senior year of college, and I live off campus. I had 2 roommates in my apartment, townhouse thing, named Natalie and Katie. Anyways, Katie was out of the night doing some homework in one of the school buildings, and I was awoken at 3 a.m. when I heard some knocking at the door downstairs. I thought it was weird, considering the hour, but I figured someone had the wrong place and would realize and leave. The knocking didn't stop, though. I lied in bed for a good several minutes thinking, yeah, they'll go away now. They'll go away. They'll get bored. As one might expect, though, I started to get confused, and then kind of freaked out by this person's persistence. The knocking turned into banging, and I could hear the ignorance go away. Honestly, I probably should have called the police instantly, but it was in the middle of the night, and I was just confused, so I headed to the top of the stairs to see Natalie standing near the door, staring at it. Her room was at the bottom floor, so she just walked up to it. We exchanged a baffled look because of what the heck. It was 3 a.m. and this was weird. Natalie called out and asked who they are and what they wanted. "We're friends of Katie," said the voice on the other end, who sounded male and about our age. "We know her boyfriend, and we heard she was feeling down, so we came here to surprise her." That was already a weird story because, again, 3 in the morning. But thankfully, Katie wasn't even home, so we both informed them of this. "Katie's not here. She's off doing something else." "Good." "They're going to leave, right?" "They came here to see Katie, and she's not here. They'll leave us alone and we can go back to sleep." "Just open the door." I know. I know if I had called the police before, I definitely should have done it now. It was weird, though. That night I realized why people do stupid stuff in horror films. Not only had I been woken up out of nowhere, but it feels so real. To be in a situation like this. Like there's no way you could actually be in danger. That only thing would happen in horror movies, and true crime documentaries. In the questionable creepy stories online. It would never happen to me. I'm just a random, ordinary, boring person going about my business. I don't need to call the police. I'm sure this will get cleared up and everything will be fine. So yeah, Natalie and I did the stupid thing and tried to argue with them. We told them that again, Katie wasn't there, and there was no need for them to stay. Eventually, Natalie asked them for their names. Throughout the encounter, we made out 2 distinct voices, but only one gave us a name. And I texted Katie without telling them, asking if she was friends with someone with that name. After a couple minutes, during which we were still arguing with this stranger, Katie replied, "I am, but I don't think she knows where I live." That wasn't good, but even worse, she? The person at the other door had a male voice, so that was a real name, but not the real person. Whoever this was knew stuff about Katie, like who she hung out with. I told Katie to stay where she was and not to come back until we told her everything was okay. Finally, we told the guys that if they didn't leave, we're going to call the police. No. Don't call the police. Don't call the police. Okay. If we wanted to do something bad, we already would have done it, right? Yeah, that last bit wasn't helping their case. Just open the door, okay? The attempts at reasoning with them basically devolved into them telling us to just open the door. Just open the door over and over again. Until we finally actually did call the police. We hid in Natalie's room and dialed 911 and explained what was going on. Thankfully, there was a police station close by, so it wouldn't take them long to arrive. Unfortunately, I made the mistake of heading back into the living room, telling them through the door that we called the cops. But contrary to what you might think, they actually didn't seem to scare them at all. They seemed only mildly upset and kept arguing. To this day, I can only assume that they didn't believe us or something. Then we heard a neighbor's home door swinging open, in a very pissed off man's voice. "If you don't leave right now, I'm fucking calling the police." For whatever reason, that's what caused them to freak out and they drove off. The police arrived and we told them the whole story. Natalie revealed that a couple times she had just barely peeked through the blinds of the window close to the front door, and she noted that there were only 2 guys, but only one of them was ever at the door at any given moment. They would switch, one at the door and the other sitting in the driver's seat of the car parked out front, presumably for getaway purposes. So yeah, that's reassuring. They also hadn't looked drunk, according to Natalie, and they definitely hadn't sounded like they were drunk. There wasn't much the police could do besides sweep the area a bit, but they told us if the stranger showed up again, to immediately call instead of engaging with them. One of the officers did give us the self-defense tactics, and told us what kind of household items/chemicals would work best for self-defense. After making sure everything was okay and reassuring us, they left. And we eventually did call Katie, told her that the weirdos were gone. She arrived and was understandably a bit shaken up herself. We sat down and asked her who might have known where she had lived. She did know people who had come to the apartment, so some people, certainly. But Natalie hadn't recognized the guys outside as previous visitors. Worse, it turned out that not only did they know Katie's friend's name, but they claimed to know her boyfriend, even though he didn't even live in the state where they were going to school. She swore up and down she didn't know anyone who wanted to hurt her. By this point, it was around 5 a.m., so I didn't even bother going to sleep. Since I was going to a workshop that morning, I told a lot of my classmates the story, and it freaked them out too. And the entire day, Natalie and I jumped every unexpected noise, every shadow, every random moment. That night it was hard to sleep, and I expected to hear knocking at the door at any second. Thankfully, they didn't come back. Ever. But that almost makes things more unsettling. In a way, I'll never even know what they wanted that night. Did they think we were hiding Katie? Was she seeing less than savory people in secret? Did they want to hurt her? If they did, why did they never give up and go looking for her somewhere else? Was all this just an excuse to get into the apartment of a young woman? Did they want to kidnap us, hurt us, rob us? Who knows? I try not to let it bother me. But I wish I knew if my life was in danger or not that night. I got a feeling I might have been. After all, they weren't wearing face covers, so if they wanted to commit a violent crime, they might want to get rid of the witnesses. But despite how much I wish I knew, yeah, random strange men who insisted we let them inside of for unknown reasons. Let's not meet again.
Story number 1. This was a long time ago. I was doing snowboarding classes. Already way too advanced for the class, but it gave me something to do and get out of my parents' hair. At this time, I was still identifying as a girl. This was back in 2010. Since then, I've transitioned to become a man. It's been 8 years. This is important because of what happened next. I was with my class and going up the lift. Once I got off, I went right instead of left, like the rest of the class, and got a bit lost. There were a couple of guys at the top of the slope. I asked if they saw a class go by. They said no, but that I could go down with them. I beat them down the slope, and once at the bottom, I was completely separated from my class. I was already scared because there was still over an hour and a half left until my parents picked me up, and I had lost my group. The guys said, "Let's go up again on this one." This lift only went to the super tough slope. And I mean really tough, steep with trees. I was already nervous but agreed, and we went up. At the top, the guy said they had a few beers in their car and that we should all go and get them. I was suspicious and honestly scared. I thought if I did make it down the slope, they would just corner me and take me to the car, since there was no one around at the bottom and it was right by the car lot. They kept nudging me forward by my hips and grabbing me, and then I had had enough. I sped down as fast as I could, ducked into the trees. This was the most terrifying thing I've ever done. I was going fast, and I had to go about 10 meters through the trees to get to the easier run and away from the two men. I fell halfway through out of panic and ended up seeing my teacher. I told her what happened, and she didn't let me out of her sight until my parents arrived. Now I wish I could go back and stay the hell away. Story number 2. This happened a while ago, so my recollection of this isn't going to be word for word, but here goes. I'm a teenager. Me and my mother live alone. We live basically in the middle of nowhere. The nearest town is a little less than an hour away, and the only things we have near us are a gas station and a bar. I know everyone who lives near me, and we rarely ever see new people in our neck of the woods. So just seeing someone who isn't familiar is suspicious enough. So this was pretty creepy. A couple years ago, it was the middle of the night. Me and my mother are night owls. We like to be awake from that midnight to 6 a.m. time period that most people prefer to be sleeping. My mother was watching TV in the living room, and I was using the computer in the kitchen. The kitchen and the living room are basically connected, so I wasn't too far away from her, only a few feet. The front door leads right into the living room. It's a door with 9 windows, so it's pretty easy to see inside. My mom looked towards the door and she saw somebody staring at her through the window, and he was wearing a hood that obscured almost all of his face. My mom jumped, and of course walked to the door and asked him what the hell he was doing. According to my mother, he looked pretty young, but she could barely see his face, so who knows how old he was. The man said something along the lines of, could you help me with my car? Please. In a tone I could only describe as miserable and off-putting. Even though it was dark, there should have been enough light for her to see a car. There was no car. The man was also holding his hands in his pockets tightly. My mother said no and apologized. This caused him to grip whatever was in his pocket tighter, so tight it caused his arms to tremble. He stayed a few more minutes and then he swiftly disappeared. Throughout the night, maybe 1 or 2 hours later, we thought we had heard slight weeping, but we didn't see anyone at any of our doors and windows. I may be making assumptions here, but I can only assume it was a weapon that he was holding in his pockets. This was a creepy as fuck experience, and it's safe to say he was going to lure my mother out of the house to do something sinister to her. A year ago, there was a very small metal plate jammed between the front door strike plate and the piece that goes inside of it. I'm not sure what it's called. We have zero idea where this metal plate came from, but the metal plate stopped our doors from locking, so I'm assuming it was put there so that somebody could get in at a later time. These things are probably not related, but it made me think of the man, because this was deliberately placed there by somebody, and we're not sure why. Creepy guy staring at my mother through the door after midnight, in the middle of nowhere. Let's not meet again. Story number 3. This happened just last night. I live in beautiful San Jose, California, on maybe the border of the nice part of town and the ghetto in a 2nd-story condo. I suck at sleeping, so while I'm laying awake in bed around 3 a.m., I suddenly hear a man riding by on a bicycle. It's important to note here that we have homeless people rummaging through the dumpsters immediately below our bedroom window nearly every single night, and I never feel afraid. However, this man, as he passes my window, starts loudly yelling, "I'm gonna get you. I'm gonna cut out your lungs," in a seemingly maniacal tone of voice. It almost sounded like he was joking, except that because of the volume and the tone, you could tell that he most certainly was not joking. It was a voice that I feel like I'll never forget. I don't think I've ever felt so afraid in my life, and I would consider myself the type that really doesn't feel fear particularly often. My initial reaction was that he was chasing someone, and while I felt like I maybe should call 911, I didn't want to chance him hearing me on the phone. We have to sleep with our windows open because no one installs air conditioning here for some unknown reason. My 3-month-old daughter was also asleep in the next room with the window open, on the 2nd story though, and maybe that was part of the reason I felt so abnormally fearful, because the last thing I would ever want to do is put her in danger. Anyway, like I said, the guy sounded like he was riding past on a bicycle, and he continued on his trajectory away from my condo, but I continued to hear him yelling for the next 15 minutes, maybe circling on a nearby street. I kept debating whether or not to call 911, or whether to wake up my sleeping husband to see what he thought, but I basically felt almost frozen in fear, which is highly uncharacteristic for me, so ended up doing neither of those things. He rode past our window maybe once or twice more during his 20-minute-long frenzy, till finally I couldn't hear him anymore. Ultimately, I have no idea whether he was actually chasing someone or something. I never felt like I heard any second party at all, or whether he was just high as a kite. But the one thing I do know is that I've never experienced fear the way I did last night. It felt almost visceral, and I truly hope I never feel that kind of fear again. Story number 4. My grandparents own a cabin on a remote lake, a few hours from the city we live in. I've been going there my whole life. I'm now in my 40s, along with my entire family, including my aunts, uncles, and cousins. It's where we party and relax. We play cards, we fish, we ride ATVs, and usually a healthy amount of alcohol for the adults. There's about 70 cabins and some campgrounds around the lake. It's very lively in the summer, completely dead in the fall and winter. A few years back, some of us cousins decided to replace the original cabin floor with Pergo. People chipped in and I agreed to lay the flooring. This was now in October. One of my cousins, a female with a full-size truck, picked up the flooring and went to drop it off at the cabin. She has planned on staying the night and returning the next day, but as she was bringing in the Pergo, a man walked onto our lot and approached her. Luckily, she had a .45 holstered on her belt. We get hungry and curious black bears occasionally, and a mountain lion once in a blue moon. The guy starts asking questions, but she's more focused on his appearance. Typical homeless drug user look, but with dead eyes. She repels his question and tells him he needs to move on, while keeping her distance for enough time to draw and fire if necessary. Luckily again, he says bye and moves on. But she has a gut feeling to get the fuck out of there. She drops the flooring quick and splits. A few weeks after that, I head up for the weekend to work alone. She had told me about the guy, but I just figured he was a hungry drifter. I do a little prep work that evening and crash around 10 p.m. Maybe because I was alone, I decided to sleep with my pistol. Not sure what time, but I woke up to footsteps on the deck. Very light footsteps, but the deck is very creaky. Initially, I thought bear. I was about to sit up when a shadow crossed the window. I didn't move except to grab my gun, which was under the covers with me. I was glad I had, but I still felt relatively paralyzed in the moment. Then he just stepped in front of the window. My eyes immediately closed to a slit, but I could still see. It was a man, but just the figure with subtle details because there wasn't much moonlight. I could actually see his scraggly beard off the sides of his face, but his face had no detail. A gun only helps if you aren't petrified with fear. In the back of my mind, I knew if this guy got in, he was getting shot. Sure enough, after watching me for maybe an hour, he tried sliding the window. The window was locked because of the cooling temperatures. He moves to a sliding glass door, but that is locked as well. Then to the front door. The whole time I'm thinking, should I get up now and freak out, or wait until he gets inside? Honestly, I was getting pissed and almost wanted him to get inside. This piece of shit scared my cousin, and now he's been terrorizing me for the last few hours. The last I heard, he had tried the front door handle, but nothing for the last 5 minutes. I was sick of this and about to get up and go crazy when he's back at my window. I just continued laying there. There was a feeling in the air of madness, to best describe it. Like this person's energy was capable of horrible things. Another hour of watching me goes by and then he leaves. I keep listening but hear nothing else. Minutes are like hours and finally the sun comes up. I creep room to room, pistol ready, but find nothing. Another hour of the sun getting higher and I was ready to check outside. I searched the whole property, the woodshed and the water tower. He was gone, thankfully, but he left footprints, fresh off the deck with obviously different sole patterns than mine. I reported this to the rangers. We told other cabin owners to spread the word. I decided to bury it in my mind because I love the place, and I always go. Story number 5. When I was a child around the age of 7 or 8, I picked up the habit of getting on the phone and listening on phone calls of other people. My parents had just gotten new cordless phones, and my sister and I were allowed to each have one in our rooms. I would occasionally listen into my sister's calls of gossip, or my mom talking to her friends. Normally I would pick up right after a call was answered, and would immediately mute the phone. Most of the time I would become bored, and I would go right back to playing my N64. It was the excitement of no one knowing I was there that made it so fun, at least until that night. The night I felt like someone knew I was there, and that's when I stopped doing it. It was a weeknight during late fall, around midnight. I hadn't been able to sleep, so I was quietly playing video games in the dark with the sound off. The phone rang and I immediately got excited. Who would be calling this late, and for what reason? I waited until the ringer stopped, and I immediately picked up the phone and muted it. I heard my dad saying, No, I think you have the wrong number." The guy responds, "Nah, man, let me talk to Chris." My dad keeps insisting, "You have the wrong number." "No one by that name lives here," he told the man. "Please do not call back." My dad hangs up the phone, but I stay on. I then hear loud breathing for a couple seconds, followed by him saying, "I'm going to kill you. I'm going to fucking kill you." Then he hung up. It's like he sensed that someone was still listening on the line. I never understood why this originally normal-sounding guy, who was looking to talk to his friend, would oddly say that on the phone, and in that tone of voice. That night I didn't sleep, and I quickly turned off the TV, so the light wouldn't shine out the window to draw attention. After this, I no longer picked up the phone to listen in. So creepy guy who called and told me he was going to kill me. Let's never meet again. Story number 6. Myself and 2 other friends were driving through town late at night. We were on our way to pick up another friend so we could all go back to mine and my other friend's place to play video games. It was roughly 2 a.m. and pouring rain outside. To get to our friend's place, we needed to go up this road that was steep and a little winding. We get to this one particular turn in the road, which happens to also be the only section of road with a streetlight. As we come around the bend, standing under the streetlight in the middle of the road was a man. He's very tall and broad and had a solid, wide stance, with his arms at both sides. My friend stops and everyone in the car just goes silent. We're all very confused and freaked out. I start telling my friend that maybe he should just back up and leave. However, my friend rolls down the window and asks the guy if everything is okay. The guy puts one hand out and starts stepping toward the car. I'm panicked now and I start yelling to my friend to back up. He backs up slowly and the guy starts stepping faster towards our car, still reaching out, but now he's yelling. Keep in mind, like I said, it's pouring rain, and this man is casually standing in the middle of the road at 2 a.m. My friend starts reversing quickly down the road and veers off into a gravel area. I suggest we call the cops about this. As we talk about it, a cop car drives up the road and we wave him down. We tell him what happened, and he says he's already told that man to go home once. The cop leaves and goes up the road in the direction of the man. We wait before attempting to go back up the road. When we do drive back up, the cop car is gone, and the man is also gone. We assume the cop picked him up and put him in the drunk tank for the night, but this man had to be on something a lot worse than alcohol. It felt like a scene right out of a horror movie. So to the creepy man at 2 a.m. in the pouring rain, let's not meet again.